Achonach je keir satini chaltakat Johan. Je achtu je ke wujin chasati. Je ichtidei. Je awa USA. Ja internet. Chulcha Kenny Grant. Handakugudi a. Je kunachoe a shagug ya hagukatangi. Tachonachu ke du in ayayuk achbatan. Je taik tehin oe. Chana kawani gadat we kit guni. Kunachoe du tuasagu awasku aya. Ja skallnig tachonach je ke. Well, taik tak shu a hichen. Wujin yuk out to at oe adat. Chadcha chu. Aqawe ach tuasagu an a da ye jachwanei. Zu a da ye jachanei. Wishkallnig. Ja kit guni. Ja yidet ra tlallingit ane ka ye chat ute. Ja achlil kohas ane ka. Ja tram so you do a sak aya has to ane. Just cleatge, tatge. Oslo chat utien. Yidet ra tram so. Konachoe na ki. We aadé aya katu atini ye. Ja Xeiyí. Juno dach Seattle Day, Seattle dach Amsterdam Day, Amsterdam dach Oslo Day. Iku yati. Wasach to us and just we think it on in a key kanach with to the test with zien. Es wasach ko a ja yidat ka konachoe has to dot away you took the ton. We tant a kwan. Kitchan aya gwalli satin with atkushach et. Put qadi aya gwalli we jigax to Shaa. Chutle we Shaa ya dach away wishach et at ya as kwan et zu. Ach a has to kitty kee ausene. Xeiyí. Je konachoe has to dot you tuch the tank. Lingitich einachoe utisaku dat yachsawe with te qadi. Katlat qadi. Kut qadi. Joy yeoe yechoji a ya nachlitzin a ya. Wek te qadi awe ya yidat. A joe ya nach ya nadéin ya singit ani. Ye awe ya llukach adi. Ha ane ka ye wutien. Ya wasadu asago at. Yendistak ye yidu asak ha ane. A ye wuti. Dich a wutli hit. Ha chagut hu a ye yeti. We icht koa du juni tin. Gwasloe du in kauduanik. Gwashchit. We kutk. We te. We ltakat hu du in a kawanik a da. A kachakutani de awa has utlagas. Ye awe ltakat hu helmasa haswuti. Hasoe auseneer. We icht. De ja zu. Ja an. Has would does on and away talk we singit we x'úx'u goon kunachoe has to us a goon it was she at the hini a wutien de ya shqaqwe a ya nach at de ya achoetze we echt du juni tin aus a ku with at gwashchid which altakat has to in the kawanika da. Altakat waiting get the dachas wool gas. Ach we x'úx'u. Kaltuch ek. has awahin. Yaltakat has woona. Du kade away wushachid. Yidet kotet katin wutisaku yatlat kaya haani. Aadé away which algo haku has awas kuun. Ye away gulchish yuxatini. Zoom kakaya ye hakwati. Ya gwell nask Sunday ak. Kakwa ak kadeni jide kakwa chak we yejene. Kashtageenach ach twasagu kanacho yan ha woonei. Gallingidir atangi teen aya wooch ye kagachtus tea. Ye awa ach tendetani ye yeti wooch gallingid neeli gachtutli yech hada ye yeti. Aadé aya wooch yeje toonéi ye. Tallatzinten qaqasachan atilla an. Jadada tinarsa yeti kakwa aqajide kakwa tii. Ga aqaqagachtushi wujin. Ya chakut ataya ya lingidi retangitin. Kudus tii. Ya wan qanins adata we stu iltu. Ya just qoa itwasagu eqenach ya kanadeni ya hayu retangi. Atxati at. Ya atlein qoa ha in khaswusati. Ja adusa ach awla tu ha in khasati. Xeiyí awla tu ha in khasati. Wasa has to toa sagu ya deich aya ye kutus tien. Ye awa ajawe kadenka gachta ach wujin. Jadata tinach sa ti jachan kananik. Ya chukwa aya atlein jashagun haji yekwati. Sakshami. Aqa awe kegachladzi llingid reinach aya wal. Achtu asagud Cleidushu jin kat winnets ranach cleich gau krak. Just llingid reinach. Aqa gwell coca hadis gwell disclain. Achtu asagu dachadushu jin kat Caucasian winnets. Just llingid reinach. Aqa jin kat Caucasian winnets. We English reinach aya wujin yurgagachtu la aadi. Dada tinirsa hayati. Awe aadé wujin yurgagachtu la aadi yaqwa konachoe dati techotan. Wasa yagachtu la chal de kat uhan. Tlachtoashko itudu hihi. Tlachtoashko acha kayi chedli. Ajawe wujin yagachtu ne. De kat uhan. Ja ach klar du ach ish du klar ane kaye hayati. Anaski kutzeti hu. Du ish ho a Norway aya adach kautekeno yidu asak ya hastu ani. Adeka kwa kuch wal dechi agi yakwachi. Ach tu yak ya ach kelhas kasetinch. Jan ko ach tu yak wooch geht ya gachtu da ad ya ach klil ko hasani. Hachitu aya konachoe yak ka. Ade awe achiti de shi. Ishan wasa itakakoteshi. Oh, atlena. Wujin yejagachki neko atalta katyuhan. Atlen ganchish. Ya shukwa aya chadusa de tuasagutlin gitrinach tangi. Ya yidat gug. Aqa English teen. Wujin yugagachtula a talta katatda. Di idhoha. Ella atinech. Okay.
Actuasi gu wasaku masa kuyaki Norway.
Oslo kuat ya tatge tsiudaku sa tanjayegu gink. Ara awe honach oe audagan. Kusana. Chitle kusana. Fuwus nai. Wasa. Chatkau duasai. Wuke ko wuke. Aga awe tram so ade kutuatin. Kunachoe siu dakusatan ka ayaw de ti. Ya pase wa at. Chatko adatu tuchtatan. Juno kake ye chatyati. Disclaim ko disclaim yachyati we kuti. Ya Takudzi oe hasu ani. Ya do we Arctic Circle you do a sago at akinaye hayati. Ayanach na ki. Ya atlain keitla di yachyati. Kashingatane keitla di yach. What jayeg hasu wa ya. Aadé oe you has kewatani ye chakut yede. Has konachoe lagao. Ya just Keikegi Yagre Hawati, Tromso. Kanakawanik, Paris of the North, you do a sakle kakrinach. Konacheke, we museum a yike Hawati. Khoach adat away, we Sami, Aadé aya, wasa, has to kach cool gowan, ya has to yukatangi. Has to kusti, has to way boarding school, residential school, kustian. Tlesh, ya tlingetani ka tlach tlesh ushke, ya de koa, tlesh ushke a koa, gwell tlesh a ye wutian, way adatki da it juta nugu. Ya koa yes ya ka, tlesh yi kak, yi shiko has yukatangi. Just Norwegian. Ya yidet ko a Sami Parliament kudzati ka atlain Xeiyí at ya hasag ya wadlaq hastu ye jineiyí teen. Ye ewa gwell chakut Sami a ya hastu inyuch akwatan adan. Bata tina hayati gwell hatu wasagu hastu yach a ya ayuch atangi kegach litzini. Bilchish.
Jeez.
Naskau ka Cajun jinkat winnets aya with utat tlech tatin. Jaan ko ako akwe ketladi. Ke hasa ich. We atlain hit the ka ya has to kut the kutzeti. But we hit to one aya yiguti. Gane ke hasa ich. But andin. Skaidu.
Inalchisio satini sa katiwan yag satini tsu shtuga khatati ai yegi yag achtiat tromso khatsu aadé dakin tromso khatsu khok idida shi January
Awak Dísi.
Awak Dísi plain x'úx'u conference
Wushkanach with the adi.
Ushkanach
Wushkanach wushkanach would do adi.
Ushkanach would adi Ashtakat yis ka yi shawat amliech or yi shawat ka yis ka dach or no take dach kach kushtiachte but tronso aadék padakin too.
Okay. But yis ku kagi yes.
Ah,
For the benefit of the young people. Okay. An kadan. Ye wooch kutzeti hechosaku wasagach tusa. Wooch atudach yet atudach woodeiḳ wooch at katayi kutzeti. Aka away roundabout kutzeti way tunnel teen. Atlain tunnel kutzeti watletoasaku chamzo dati kochu at katayi. We parking lot su gwaltech handed at woodeiḳ at kutzeti we at katayi shikuzi haskach wawus ha juno de nagu ya atlain wood aya gwalkach hitle yechiug ge wacht wasaku aqatlech we gwalwe on kadachoy wudletik pashtiach at katayi de kwakoch kelulzi shikuzi at the yeah. We'll make the switch. I'll recap for everybody. If you haven't, you might not have been around Tlingit for a little while. So just so that you all know, it's always good to be around Tlingit, even if it's getting into the deep waters. That's good. Let's see, I'm in Norway. I'm in Europe for the next until September 14th. I don't get back till the 14th. So things will start a little differently this semester. I'm superbly grateful to Jigwoo for saying, how can I help? And I hope he doesn't regret saying that because like, oh, you can teach these classes for like a while. And so, but in this class, we're all going to work together a lot because this class, I don't think, maybe it's been done before, but it's the first time I have done this where the whole goal, like, so we're trying to develop a 4th-year language program. So basically study, use the language, and of course continue to study. But the whole goal for us, like the only thing we have to do is stay in Tlingit for an hour. That's all. But we're going to work ourselves up to that. And then we're going to get ourselves up to 75 minutes in Tlingit and a 15-minute reflection. But as we sort of engage in this, what this means is an awful lot of work to try and get ourselves ready for it. And then to execute the sort of moment. And I think it has to be this way. Like I remember we started trying to do immersions a lot more. Like, so this is going back to probably, I don't know. I remember them a lot in the early 2000s, but there was some kind of shift, I think, that happened 2011, 2012, where we just started getting together a little bit more. And King Gisti and I were having this conversation. And remember, we'd do like an hour. And it seemed like that hour would take about 10 hours, right? It would just be so intense. And you'd be sitting there trying to think of what to say and what to do next and stuff. And then, but if we kept doing that, it got a lot easier. And so that is something like the only way to do it is to do it. But we're going to get, as far as how this course starts, you folks are blessed to have a couple weeks with Jigwoo, and he's been studying a long time, and he's come up so far with the language. Like, it's so fun to talk to him about stuff that we're working on with Shagun Dutla, and just the amount of stuff that he can pick up. And so the idea is for you folks to kind of become this pod, right? Because whenever we do this, to say, okay, let's just speak Tlingit for like 90 minutes, 60 minutes, 75 minutes, like you're creating this whole universe that really doesn't exist right now in too many places. And so as we do that, we're always conscious of what it takes to be in that space, and everybody You all belong here. This is a wonderful place for you to be. Even if like you feel overwhelmed, even if you feel like you're not sure how you're going to do it, you're going to do it. Like it's going to be okay. But it does take a certain mentality to sort of be in that space and to push, as I think about like what it takes for learners, like it just feels like there's all these barriers, like you're trying to swim in these icy waters, but then also you got to crawl over this pile of logs and you got to, swim around this monster. And it's like just obstacle after obstacle. But my goal is to remove all the obstacles, like what's in the way. And so I want us to have conversations, especially as we kind of get started over this. It's going to be a long, slow start. So basically until October, I want us to be engaged in a lot of discussions about what do you need to be able to speak Tlingit and to be able to understand it? Like what are the things that are sort of holding you back? And these are always interesting conversations for me, because at some point, the English brain doesn't always know what it needs anymore. It's gotta give way to Tlingit. I think a lot about a conversation I had with someone who was in a pretty deep stage of learning Tlingit. And they said, I do really good until about 5 minutes in. And then all of a sudden I can't really understand what people are saying. And I just want to get out of there. And I said, well, I think that's like the English side of your brain just really trying to hold on. And I think you're trying to translate every single thing into English and then think about it in English and then translate it into Tlingit, that's how languages get learned. Like you have this way of thinking and understanding, which is based on the grammatical structure of the language that you might be speaking. And then to fully engage in this other language, like at some point you have to let go of that side and sort of construct this other side, like, and so, but it's a really interesting process to me because there's a lot of similarities. I think it's a lot like, hey, I'm in Norway. Like the weather is very similar because we're at a very similar longitude, but so much stuff is different. Everything, like stuff is a lot cleaner here. Like I don't know how they did it, but it was like, bring all this stuff over to Alaska. Like our buildings look so old. And I walk around, I'm like, that looked like it was built yesterday, And so um, there's a lot of things here that are really fascinating. But one of the things that's also similar is there was a lot of language oppression of Sami people in Finland and Sweden and Norway and in Russia. And so in this place that's called Sapmi, which is the land of the Sami peoples. And so we were in a museum yesterday and saw these wonderful, wonderful sort of exhibits that were constructed by Sami peoples. And we learned quite a bit about the Sami resistance and the parliament that they, constructed here in Norway and the ways that they brought their language back. And so it's interesting. They did have boarding schools or residential schools here, but I do think they weren't, they're just a little bit less genocidal. They were certainly terrible places because their intention was to get everyone to stop speaking Sami and to have them speak Norwegian. But it seems, and I haven't talked to too many people about it, but it doesn't seem to have as much of the physical and sexual and emotional and mental abuse that the schools in North America seem to have. But still, there was a resistance. There was, we listened to the voice of an ancestor who just like, give me 5 minutes on the radio, give me 5 minutes. And, and then became more and it became more. And the language was being used in public radio here. And then when there was sort of like this declaration of the rights of Sami people and a report about what happened to their language and what should happen now, it was really cool to hear all the different ways that people made things happen. And then, but there's this like structural side. Like if we wanted to bring Tlingit back to a day-to-day use language, there is some things I think need to change, like within societies and governments. But the single biggest thing for us is probably the individual making that commitment and engaging and pushing themselves over and taking chances and just going for it, which is, it's the tough part. It's the really tough part, because you've been doing this work sometimes for just a decade or more, or just years and years and years. And then you'll get frustrated because you can't say this like single thing, right? Or you'll hear this phrase and you're like, I have no idea what that, I've never heard that before, But every language, I think, encounters this, and especially endangered languages. If there's just not a place to hear it on the regular, use it on the regular, that becomes something kind of different. So I'm excited about this class. And so I've been thinking about this for years now, to say, well, we need this sort of this, basically the idea is in the fall and the spring we'll run this. And so one is going to be Tlingit Culture and Worldview, which is this one. That'll be run in the fall. And the other one is going to be Tlingit Oral Literature, which will be run in the spring. So the idea is to have something specific to talk about, which I think will kind of help us. And so the basic, let's see, let me make sure I said most of the stuff that I said. Oh, my father's mother is Sami. She was born in Alaska, and her father was born in Norway. So we're going to go to the village where he's from, and where I have relatives. And so that's why I'm here. We're involved in a documentary that's being made about Sami people who grew up outside of Sapmi. And so I get to meet relatives and talk to people. My grandma, she passed away when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And so I never got a chance to know her that well. But now I'm figuring out all these things that I think she probably wished that she could have taught me, which is really exciting. And it's a really wonderful opportunity. And so I think this movie is going to come out sometime in 2025. The premiere might be in Sweden, so let's all go to Sweden and speak Tlingit. Well, I don't know which way it'll be. And anyways, we're having fun. I just talked to my kids in Tlingit here, which is, it's really interesting. I was talking to them, I was like, this is so interesting to me that we're walking around speaking Tlingit, and we're in the land of like my ancestors who spoke Sami. Well, we were a little bit further south. And then there's people all around us speaking Norwegian, and there's people speaking all these different languages. And so also thinking about just I guess it's called a polyglot, right? So folks who are in this part of the world, I think it would be very unusual to live here and only speak one language, right? Like most people speak several. And to try and think of like, how does that get replicated where we are, so that, yeah, you could speak Tsimshian, and you could speak Dagetan, or you could speak Haida, or you could speak, Tishoni and Tagish, and like just thinking of these things and not trying to have this extremely limited sort of monolingualism, or in the case of Canada, usually like a bilingualism, right? Like, and just to think of like how to continue to get to the depth of what it takes to be able to just speak and understand this wonderful language. And so I think the only other thing I said that I didn't maybe translate yet was they have these tunnels here in Tromsø. So this is above the Arctic Circle. And as far as like, you can drive around a lot of this town. I think their goal is to be able to drive anywhere in town, and you'd have these parts where you drive under the earth in this tunnel system that has roundabouts and a giant parking lot. And then you could pop up to where you want to be, and you could like park under the village, under the town, and go up to where you want to be. And I said, this is great. I was like, you guys should come to Juneau and like build a whole tunnel network for us, because this is like they're going to go under the water. They're going to go, it's just really, really cool to think about. Anyways, like a lot of innovative stuff over here. Really, all the buildings are clean. Like I don't understand how everything is so clean over here, but I think it's just a mindset. So welcome to the semester. Let's all say hi to each other. Like, so let's say your name, and then maybe say where you're at, and then say one thing that you're increasing your confidence in when it comes to speaking Tlingit. And then name one thing that's still a little bit challenging for you. I'll put those in the chat.
Sorry, you said our name, where we're at, one thing that's helping us speak, and what else?
And then one thing, so your name, where you're from, one thing that you're starting to feel a lot more confident about, maybe recently especially, and then one thing that's like still an area of struggle for you. Skaidu.
Yeah. I had to was ook skaidu. Yi dat ook kwan anik. I hadeti. I lost it. I lost it. So you said something that what was the first thing? I know the second thing is something that we're having issues with.
Something that you're feeling, we're just being open and honest with each other, but something you're starting to feel more confident about.
Okay, yeah. I'm feeling more confident, I guess, with speaking to fluent speakers. That's something I like avoided at all cost, I guess, my first couple of years, and I didn't notice it. I'd be just kind of starstruck. So now I'm working on being just more courageous, and even if I have to like repeat things and try to say it in other ways. And then something that I'm working on that I noticed is a gap with my learning is talking in past tense and future tense. I can talk a lot in present tense, but I realized something that I'm working on is that's how come I was saying I will fly to Tromsø, Norway. I was like, hey, this is my time to talk in future tense. And so just trying to find more space to be able to talk about that. And yeah, I was really excited to hear that you're in Tromsø, Norway, because I'm going there. I was trying to say, and I realized I couldn't say it when I started saying it, is I'm going to a conference made by, I said young women and young men, but I meant like young people for young people. Like, so it's a conference, the first time that they're running one made by young people for young people. But so I thought that was cool that you're there right now. So I think I answered everything.
Okay. That's ja. You're hellech mute cook.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, I anaki you katua sok too. Ashungu ki dia kaudliai hit anaka hidi you do a sok. Jun zankihini ye yeti. On. So my name is Dashacha, Casey Lee. Some people call me Donna Keat. I live here in Juneau. I live in downtown. And the one thing I'm really, really proud of is making a document and I'm always adding to it, how to conjugate in the perfective form. I feel like I've been studying it for so long and things are just starting to click. And I think it was just all the terminology. And now that I have the terminology, now my friends and family are like, what are you talking about? As if talking, just speaking Tlingit wasn't hard enough. Now they're like, oh, what's a preverb now? Like classifier? What's that do? So transitive or intransitive. But I made this document so it doesn't focus on the linguistic side or the terminology so much and more of a plug-in, an experiment. And I didn't put all of the little rules on there quite yet. I was trying to decide how I wanted to do it. And so what I did is I made it, I think I'm going to have a separate sheet for the teacher. so that when these questions come up, when you're trying to speak, and you say, why does it do that? You're like, hey, just check this out. I'm really good with just chit chat, and I know phrases that would fit the occasion. But when it comes to actual conversation, I really struggle. And then I feel like I'm doing trigonometry in my head when I'm trying to conjugate without looking at all my papers. So I'm trying to find that balance there. And I feel like I'm kind of taking steps back because I'm also trying to document my process. Because I've found myself at the point where people are like, "Oh, how do you know that?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." Or who taught you that? And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." So I'm kind of making these breadcrumbs so that if anyone was to ever be like, "Hey, where did you start?" I could be like, "You know what? Here's everything I have." And this is kind of where I started, and you can just follow along. But hooch, sheesh.
Jeez.
Wasway llygad i hon, nellgad hwge, Xeiyí, Xeiyí, downtown Xeiyí. Hayal's still nellgad hwge, still living downtown, on the Quonset hut on the hill sliding down. So one thing I'm getting confidence about is this summer I was forced to do some live translation on the fly, and it has really helped me listen to voicemails left to me in Xinke, because I have two people who like to call and leave voicemails about very, very important matters involving money. And it is critical that I know what they're talking about. So I feel a lot of confidence about that and being able to listen and understand. Bofskadi and Dahacha already took the two things I was struggling about, conjugating in the past and the future, and also speaking, but I think I'm getting a little better on that, just because there's people around me who I really appreciate who force me to do it and just let me focus on what I'm trying to communicate to and just stay in the language, then help me repeat and correct later. And so one thing I've been struggling with is being committed to my transcription and translation exercises. I will stick to my hours and check it, but I will go find almost anything else to do. And so I have one assignment that was given to me this summer that I look at it, I listen to it, and then I go find something else to do. Like go write a journal entry and Xinke instead. So that's what I'm struggling about, is being committed about my transcription and translation. And it's sheesh.
Jeez. Oh, here's a good one. Jineiyí. Pay me. Good phrase. Pay me for the work. And so. Okay, geez. And yeah, the transcription translation work, it's very scary when you start doing that, because it's like I think it felt really isolating when I first started doing that work, where you really study this language for a long time, and then just sitting down, it's like it felt like a one-on-one battle with like some master level, like, it's like if you've been studying like kung fu for like 3 years, like, okay, go fight the kung fu master. You're like, wait, what? Yeah, and so, but it's fun. I mean, once you really engage, like those are huge steps to take, is to engage it at that level. Okay.
Yeah, and I need to avoid it because I was there during the recording. I knew what she was saying. If I listen to it on regular speed, I can gather it. And then the moment I start like sitting down with it and doing it word by word, it's like it all just flies out of my head.
Yeah, I try to look at it as because I do artwork, so I like to look at it as like I did this exercise one time with Mike D'Angeli. So like Northwest Coast Arts is very fun. It's also very challenging. It's like a whole other language. And he would give you this paper with these little shapes on it. And then he would give you 30 seconds to make the kind of design that he would just say, like, beaver. And you would have like 30 seconds to draw it, and then he'd say, okay, raven, and it was such a neat exercise because you had so little time that by the end, you weren't thinking about trying to get it just right. You were just like throwing stuff up there. And so, not that you should be super fast about that kind of work, but I think you should think about it the way an artist approaches a sketch. It's not the final, it's not like you have to get it perfect every time you write something down. You just like, let me just put something there. I just put what I'm hearing. Because then when you come back through, you're like, okay, wait, no, I was close, but it's this thing, And so it's a really neat process, but it's certainly a prove-it moment. But also it's just you, it's just you. So
Goodness, sheesh. No, that is helpful.
do we talk aha?
Chat. Jedes Litzin, Yuchat Duasak, Daislin, Yechat Yeti, Ya Kutan, Kanach. I think one thing that I've gotten better at over the years is just speaking, like taking the risk and speaking and not having to prepare beforehand. I mean, sometimes I will have to look up a verb if I don't know it and I really want to say something, but I'm not as nervous as I used to be, which is good, I think. And I know I make mistakes. I know that last year I was talking about seeing sheep on top of a mountain, and I said that they were underneath the mountain. And, what the heck? It's just, yeah, it's all okay. It's good. One thing I worry about is I've been studying Tlingit for a long time, and I have all these notebooks. And when I look back at them, I find all these amazing gems, which I've never given another thought to after I've written them down. And I wish that I could remember them and incorporate them and get them up there. But I found this one from a year ago, and I thought, wow, this is such a good one. X'úx'u. And so that means I have to pee so bad. My pee is overpowering me. I thought, wow, that's so awesome. But I wrote it down and never gave it another thought. So how to remember all these gems.
Okay, and yeah, kayanach would be, it's overpowering me, and then kanach means it's coming over me. So it's like, I forgot that little part one time. So, and people are like, what? And I was like, oh, I was trying to be silly, but yeah, it's like kayanach is like it's overpowering, and that's just. Yeah, I agree. Like all these, I get this stack of notebooks. I just moved offices recently, and I've got this huge stack of notebooks, and it was funny because Ruth Demmer, she was telling, we were just visiting one time, and she was saying he would always come around with these little notebooks, and he always had these little notebooks, and but I think that approach, like coming at it from sort of this very structured kind of approach, I think can be really helpful. And it's interesting to me too. Yeah, every now and then I got an old, I think it's maybe my first copy of the Tlingit Verb Dictionary. And I've got all these notes all over. It fell apart, but I took all these notes on the cover, and sometimes I'll look at it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Look at that. I figured that one out. And then I'd see this other one and be like, no, that's not it, dude. And so, but it's also fun to go back and see these areas where I was able to take an approach where like there was a lot of guesswork involved, which I think some people get mad when they hear that, But I was like, well, I had to try and figure it out and then figure out what I was getting wrong in order to sort of make these adjustments. And again, like coming back to, I really think it's good to not look at things in terms of right and wrong, right? It was just a miss. I took a shot and missed, but you've got to do that in order to sort of keep going. Sheesh.
Sheesh.
Liz, Xeiyí, X'úx'u Island, anéi, Xeiyí. So I live in Camilchi, X'úx'u Island land, which is pretty close to Olympia on the Salish Sea. I'm gaining some confidence in feeling like I can listen to more for longer without doing what my brain thinks is like translating to English, definitely, because I can't go very far without feeling like I am doing click it to English, but that feels significant. And I'm also feeling confident about this sense of peace that I have with the different emotions around the language and being okay with like, I'm not always going to feel super confident and super proud of where I'm at. And like, that's just part of the process at this point. But there's times when I'm just like, I am really getting it. This is great. And then I'm like, oh, then I get really down on myself. Not too bad, but just like, oh, what am I, I'm not moving to where I want to be. And to not put too much weight or stock into either of those feelings, but instead just keep going. Maybe it's kind of like that, healing is not linear. It's do, 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 do. And like, in a way, I like the metaphor of like going up the mountain or going into deeper water, but also like there's something about that spiral, like you keep coming back to the pieces that are hard maybe as you're going up. I mean, they say that's kind of how the solar system moves anyway. So one thing I struggle with, committing verb roots to memory has been something that's hard for me. So I think that's something that I'd like to work on with buddies this year, just like trying to do more verbs, not just, I mean, yes, conjugating, but also like the verb root. I think that it's a good thing that we kind of waited a long time to start doing verbs as we're going from beginning to intermediate. But also, I think there's this resistance in me still from that era of like, oh, verbs. So, but to woo, x'úx'u, su, jigax,
Okay. Yeah, I do think it's really safe to sort of keep putting the verbs off, but I do think that there is a danger there that you'll feel like you can just keep putting the verbs off, And so because it is like that's the magic, like that's the whole thing. There's a lot of little other parts, certainly, and they are important. Like, there was another that was one that and so I'm doing a retype of the Tlingit verb dictionary. And as I do a retype of the Tlingit verb dictionary, it's really interesting because like I'll encounter a verb root and I'll think that one's not in the dictionary that I have that I'm working on. And so it's really interesting to be like, to spot a verb root and to know that you don't know it, right? And so that's the point we all want to get to, is like, oh yeah, I don't know that one, cool. But I think what I'll do is I'll just list out all the verb roots that I have written down, and we'll challenge ourselves to see how many we can identify, because there's quite a few. It'd be interesting to see how many I have right now. I can't count them, but I can export them from this thing. And this is what the thing looks like, in case y'all are wondering. Let's see. If I could find it. Here it is. So this is a program called Tlex, and so this is what the dictionary entries look like as they're being made. And so one of my summer projects has been retyping the Tlingit verb dictionary and trying to stay pretty true to how it looks, like including the illustrations, which Ida scanned for me when she was a student, like going back a decade or so. And we had some student workers, and I was like, oh, scan every picture that's in the Tlingit verb dictionary, because we're going to retype it someday, because I was blessed to have a telephone conversation with Constance Nash and Jillian Story. And I said, can I retype this? Can we remake it? And they said, it's your language. Do whatever you want with it. We were just trying to help. They were such nice people. But these are all the verb roots here. So, we start with and we go all the way down to you. And so I'll export them and make a list of them, and we'll have a little side project through the semester of making sure that we can identify. We'll just see how many do we know. Okay, oh, mute cook.
X'úx'u, X'úx'u, Xeiyí, Xeiyí, Jigax, two. I'm finding it easy if I take a paragraph at a time to feel like I can read, and I'm just on the brink of knowing lots of things. Let's see. Talking. I'm no good at small talk in English. So then when I want to talk about history or botany or politics, my Tlingit is nowhere near where I'd like to be. But I am here. X'úx'u.
X'úx'u. Nick Echawe.
Gwrthad chitwychad diwysach Quanlind yechat titi. What am I good at? I think listening, and fairly good at understanding, and that comes from hours of sitting in front of this computer trying to work on video. I was just thinking today, Toonéi, about one time Toonéi and I went down to Cake just for the day to visit Canuck. And you two are talking away, and I'm just sitting there, and all in Tlingit, you two are going at it. And then she says to you, can you hand me that stack of paper? I don't know if you remember this. Can you hand me that stack of papers that are over there on the floor? And I bend down and go for that stack of papers, and she turns to you and she says, does he understand me? Eh? Like not in the room or nothing. But anyway, I just laughed about that today. But so I can understand quite a bit. The big jump for me, I think, is speaking as well, and it's I can relate to a lot of things that I've heard here tonight already, but for me, the speaking, it's just like a muscle that you have to exercise. And if you don't, it just won't happen. And one of the things I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, I said to anéi, or whenever it was, we speak fairly regularly, but I said, can we just start speaking Tlingit and switch over to English at some point? And sometimes I'm not very happy I said that, because it is, sometimes it comes easily and sometimes not. Sometimes it's a struggle. I know I'm screwing up, when I'm speaking, but it actually has been so helpful to me, just to stay in the language for those small periods of time, because I'm used to being in that space now, more so. So yeah, I think that's people are talking about forgetting stuff. My grammar, I think I was just saying to you, is not great right now, but it comes and goes, and I think there is that balance, between fluency and correctness, and but yeah, I'll just leave it there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting over that sort of point where, well, I don't know if you really get over it, but like to say, like, it takes me so long to think of how to say it, and I have to keep like stopping mid-sentence, and like I remember we were at an event sometime, this is a while ago, and two people that I know, they kind of made a joke about me in front of a lot of people, and they said, yeah, he used to always talk a lot, but nobody could understand what he was saying, and everybody laughed and stuff. And then somebody asked me, they just checked in, they're like, did that hurt your feelings? I was like, well, it wasn't very nice, but I don't care, because like that's how I became a speaker of Tlingit, was by just doing it. Like, how else are you going to do that? And so, and I think that's really important to sort of push through that time and just have confidence that you sound better down the road. And it's not like there's no competition. There's no one, I hope that no one makes fun of you publicly like they did to me. And I don't think it was really done to be mean. But I also think it's something to just be sensitive about with yourself and with each other, and so this happens with everybody who learns another language. If you know a language and you learn another language, there's just certain patterns you've got to figure out, and there's certain sounds you have to learn how to make, and some of them will take longer than others. But I think it's also like, if we focus less on, even in this conversation, we focus less on what's missing and more on like what's gaining, like you'll actually see like there's a huge, like these are huge steps to take. And historically, there haven't been very many people who've gone this far, but we're the ones who are contributing to that ongoing change, so that there'll be a future where we'll be like, there'll be so many people, and we'll be like, oh yeah, we remember when we were at that phase, and we were struggling with these types of things. And to make it just more common to learn and use Tlingit, it's exciting. Oh yeah, who hasn't gone yet? We're gonna run out of time here. Woodeiḳ.
So, oh wait, can you hear me? Xeiyí gus kekonin kinach Eliza dami chutun sag nadéin chutí the shitan yadi chut yid Seattle ye chutati. My name is Xeiyí. My English name is Eliza Domini, and I currently live in Seattle. I think that's like one of the things that's like causing all of my struggles, is because I'm so like, I only go back home a couple of times a year. So it's kind of hard like finding like community, or just like finding people here to engage in Xinget with. So I think like that's really impacted me a lot since moving down here. It's become like a lot, like I have to think a lot harder about the language and about what I want to say. Sometimes my like friends from in Alaska will like text me in Xinget. So then I gotta figure it out and I have to like work on that even like on my like casual time. So um yeah, that's kind of where all my struggles come from. I think most of it is just like being able to talk. Yeah, being able to put sentences together. But I think some of the things that I'm like getting a little bit better at is just understanding Xinget. Like I can hear people talk for like a longer and longer amounts of time. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I understand. Like I understand what you're saying. Like I get so excited because I never used to be able to understand anything. And I would just sit there like so confused, like, oh my gosh, I'm so lost. I don't know what's I don't know what's happening. And then people would like talk in English and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't know where you came up with any of that because I don't know what you're saying. So I think that part is becoming a little bit easier. Is just being able to understand and comprehend the language. But yeah, being able to talk myself is definitely still a barrier. But also like I've been able to like memorize a lot more. So like I think of words in English and then I'll like think of that in Xinget, like, oh, we'll talk about like animals with my daughter or something, and then I'll tell her like the Xinget word. Um, so that's become a lot easier, just like memorization. But I think that I need to actually be able to like do the work to say full sentences and understand what I'm saying and do it correctly. So yeah.
ياك قلتيش خصتيني ياك اخا يلقاكم
Yesh kagu yukhat do a sock. Zantikahinish yechat yati. I'm definitely making progress. I measure my progress in Xinget against my progress learning Spanish decades ago. And there's a lot of commonalities because in both cases, I'm a native English speaker learning a second language in an entirely academic setting with very little opportunity to use it outside that setting. And so it's a different thing. I study in two different ways. I have this toonéi's Xinget reference guide, and I am slowly and painfully memorizing the verbs in it because I think you're right, toonéi. If you memorize those verbs, you can use the language at a very daily functional level. And I would like to be able to do that. So I study the verbs. And the other thing I do is read and reread Hashuka and Click Ha to Anagu Yis. I read the Xinget and then I read the English. And it's getting better. If I read the Xinget, I have some idea what's going on. And then if I read the English, I can follow the Xinget. I can follow the logic to it. Occasionally there's a little idiosyncrasy in translation between the one or the other, and sometimes I pick up on that. So that's how I study. And what's working well is I do feel that I'm learning the language. I feel I'm about at the level in Xinget that I was in Spanish after 2 years of high school Spanish, which is a low level. But some acquaintance with verbs, some ability to put words together, and I can do it, which I couldn't do a year or two ago. It does work. The challenges are I need to memorize a lot more because when you were speaking today at the beginning of class, I'm standing on a bridge watching the water flow under it. Your speech is the water. and I'm not catching everything. But I've gone from catching, say, 10% of it to catching maybe 40 to 60% of it. And I just have to let go the stuff I'm not catching. Because if I try and concentrate on what I just heard and translate it, I'll just miss a whole bunch more. And I have to just let it flow through my mind in order that, and trust myself that it's sticking. It's actually sticking, even if I'm not making sense of it in the moment. It's getting there and it's getting better. And so that's definitely getting better. The challenge is x'úx'u, jigax. I don't have enough time. And I don't spend as much time in the language as I would like to be able to. And so it's a matter of how to use the time that I have. And I really must echo a great many of the things that everyone else here has said about their learning experience, because all true. X'úx'u, Yiwan.
You had to asaku. Juno ye had yati. I'm feeling more confident about understanding sentences that I encounter. Not at the paragraph place, but even, how do you say radio in Lingi?
X'úx'u.
X'úx'u. Okay, well, on the x'úx'u, sometimes I hear a sentence. I'm like, I got that. Which I love hearing it on the radio, on the x'úx'u. I'm feeling less confident about everything else, but if I get into that habit of the time, then I can't help but progress, right? I wanted to say that I think I probably, based on how people were nodding, I understood what you said earlier less than a lot of people. But I was able to generally follow it, like you were talking about tunnels, for example, and I think in driving, and I think like I could listen to your discussions with motions for a long time. Like the motions help, even if I'm like just get like, okay, so what x'úx'u is tunnel, like a hole, or wooch, it's like a hole. It's for tunnel, yeah. And anyways, I think motions really help me be able to pay attention enough to like at least let the water rush by and keep my eyes on the water. All right, thanks.
Okay. Hagunkach.
Hagunkach. Yuchaduasak. Aquan. Yeti. I find myself agreeing with a lot of the classmates. Like, I feel like I can listen longer. I feel like I understand where the conversation is generally going. Also, what Kagu said about, like, you know, kind of watching the conversation or your speech kind of rush by, and especially after long breaks when I don't feel like I forget something or forget like a lot of the basics, I kind of panic, and it just makes me kind of freeze up, and that's something I've been concerned about.
Okay. Yeah, that moment, I'm sure I've shared this with you folks before, but we're on a beach in Yakutat. Wow, boy, it's a long time ago, probably 2012, 2013. They had a little language conference there, and George Ramos he talked to us in Tlingit. I think I have a recording of it somewhere. It's got a lot of wind noise in it, but I'll show it to you folks at some point. But he when he first came, he saw me and he walked up to me and he goes, "Equadeq. I'm going to challenge you." And I knew he was going to say something really difficult. So it's like, all right, let's go, and so, but just like to be in those moments where, like, yeah, sometimes you have to do the thing. And so we did a really cool thing here. They had a floating sauna, as they say in these parts. And so you're like on this little floating sauna and you get to, it's just so amazing. They have like, turn your music on and all kinds of stuff. And they come and put these like little essential oils into it. And because it's floating, you could jump into the water and you can jump from this little dock, you know, the deck, or you can climb on top of the thing and jump off. And it was nighttime. And I am pretty sure there's monsters in every body of water. And so jumping into water at night where it's like it's dark and it's very deep was super scary. And so like I did it and our oldest child did it, but she was like, count me down. And I'd go, nask, and she would run to the edge and then stop. She's like, count me down. And she did it like 4 or 5 times. And then she finally jumped off, you know. And so, but just like that, I think that's like a lot like speaking Tlingit. Is like you want to speak Tlingit and then you get into this environment, then next thing you know, that environment's over. And you're like, I guess I didn't talk. Huh. You know, but you know, it's okay. It's always okay because there'll be these other times and you need to naturalize this process, both the act of speaking and also the way to connect your thoughts and opinions into being able to say those types of things in Tlingit. So having a class like this, I think, is really important. And you all are you're the ones out in the forefront right now, clearing this trail, doing this important work. And so there'll be people who will come after you and it will be easier for them because of the work that you all are doing right now. And it's not I don't know, I go back and forth, right? So the Richard Dowenhauer approach, I loved him so much, but he used to tell us like, you know, I'd watch him and it'd be kind of day one, class one. He's like, yeah, it's probably the hardest language in the world, at least one of them. I don't know. I was like, lie to them, don't tell them that, you know. But then there's also the Xeiyí approach, which he'd say, which, you know, I believe. And so both things can be true. It can be a very difficult language, but also if you just keep yourself in Tlingit somehow, it is easier. So we don't have a whole lot of time left. I do want to go over the syllabus and talk about some examples of how this stuff will go, including what we'll do the week of September 14th when I'm back in Tlingit Ani. So there's a syllabus for our class. Before I open it, let me put it in the chat. I got to do some work to make sure that this stuff is on tlingitlanguage.com. So I got to create I think a whole new page now. This is exciting. And so I'll be working on that over the next few days. Things will take a little bit of time to populate, but we do have a syllabus for this class. And so one of your goals, let me share my screen. So as we go through, so this class is called Tlingit Culture and Worldview. So my thinking with this is to have a time and space to just use the language. That is really what we're here for, is just to use the language and to be in it as much as possible. So we're going to work our way up to where we're going to be, which is it's 5:30 in Alaska, which is 3:30 in Norway. It is full on 4:51 in the morning. And so we'll be filming soon. So it's a little bonkers. I cannot keep up with this schedule, which is why I reached out for help. So I won't be back with you folks until after September 14th. I'll show you folks how this is all going to work. I would really, for you folks, think of this time as like you're building yourself up to jumping off the top of the floating sauna. X'úx'u would be the floating sauna. This Zoom link is the same for the class every time. it's also the same for advanced Tlingit, which are the only 2 classes I'm teaching this semester. There are 4 wonderful sets of things here at the top of the syllabus. When I'm back, I want us to talk about all 4 of these things. And we're going to work ourselves up to this, so basically the way our class is going to start is when it is 5:30, I hit the record button and we are in Tlingit for as much time as we possibly can. Our goal is to make it 1 hour before we start using English, which means we're going to have to lean on each other a lot. And it doesn't matter. Not everything has to be fully understood and fully replied to. Like if we need to take it in a different direction, we can. My big goal is like to not just talk for an hour, but just to be in conversation with y'all, but we're going to have lots of tools to help us. And I explained how I'm hoping that this is going to work. But looking at these 4 things from shagun, guch, dakashu, kashkawu, and kanak. When I'm back, I want you all to have a firm understanding of what all these 4 things are saying. This is a communicative class. So I really am encouraging you folks to unmute, talk, like just go for it. Try and do the thing. And if the thing doesn't fully come out right, like we are going to be in this process of trying to take, the biggest thing is communication. Like there's no such thing as perfect Tlingit. I don't even think there's such a thing as correct Tlingit, if we're really being honest. Like if you just recorded somebody speaking English and wrote down word for word everything they said, you'd probably find lots of false starts and lots of like missteps and other thing like that. Like language is not a thing that's designed to be some like image of perfection. Like it's a means of communication. So we're going to spend one of our classes talking about, well, basically, here's the simple version. Tuesdays, old stuff. Thursdays, new stuff. That's the whole approach. So basically, on the Thursday class, after the Thursday class ends, you will get a packet of things. That might be recordings, it might be text, it might be images, and you're going to spend the weekend engaging with that stuff, either listening to some speaker, reading their words, looking at some pictures. For example, I might say, look at this picture. This is actually what we're going to do on the Tuesday of the week of September 14th when I'm back, because we're going to talk about this picture right here. This is the whale house in Klukwan. On the left, this is the woodworm pole. On the right, this is the raven and king salmon, their house posts. And in the back, this is the rain screen. And there's several other things here. There's these 2 bent mode boxes. One of them, the whole thing is upside down. And so there's so much like really neat stuff to talk about, but not just this photograph. And so I will post this on our class website, which is going to be tlingitlanguage.com. I do think we're going to set up probably a Discord channel that's specifically for this class, which is basically saying, here's a place we can all chat, right? So like if you have questions, if you have thoughts, my hope is we can have a place where everybody can see that stuff. And if we want to use something different, we certainly can try. And it's not a public thing, really. Well, I don't know. We'll talk about that stuff. We don't have to figure all that stuff out now. But so like, here's this image. And then not only do we have this image, but I'm going to give you this story out of the Raven book, which is Raven and King Salmon. Here's the story on the house post to the right. And then I'm also going to give you, and we have audio recordings of that. And we have an audio and video recording of this one, which is a telling of the woodworm story, which is the house post on the left. So now we're going to have these multiple things to engage with. In this first instance, we're going to have basically 3 weeks to like look at this picture, listen to those stories, read those stories, and then think about how can we talk about this single image and the many things that are in it for 1 hour. And it's this house was in Klukwan. There's a whole history to this whole thing. Somebody tried to sell all this stuff, and they actually did, and a tribal court came in and stopped it. And so it's a very long, complex history. And these things are in Klukwan in their cultural center right now. You can go see them if you want to. So that's basically what we're going to do. So on a Tuesday, you would have stuff that you'd been given the week before. You'll have the weekend to think about a whole bunch of different things. And we're going to engage in a conversation about those things. We are going to use the chat in Zoom where English is allowed in the chat. So if you're saying, but you got to keep it very short. I don't want big, long things in the chat because that means we're tuning out. But if you say, what are we talking about? Or, is this about this? Is this about that? So there can be very short things going on in the chat. We can all be in there watching it. I will probably be in the chat quite a bit less because I'm going to try and be driving the Tlingit conversation, like keeping us going. And at the end of the hour, we'll have time to reflect back. How did it go? What do we need to do this again? And, if we do this, we'll do this about, 20 to 25 times. I think it will get easier as we go along, right? And so as we do this, let's see. This is a safe space. So really, we're going to try not to correct each other, but we'll certainly help each other. Like if you know how to say something and you hear someone who's like trying to search for how to say it, or if they ask for help, especially, you can certainly chime in and help. But the biggest thing is trying to focus on what somebody is trying to say and responding to that. And it's not like this is a question and this is a specific answer. It's like, oh yeah, you were talking about this bentwood box. Well, you know what? There's this other thing about that. And so it's all about like keeping the conversation going. That's what I think is the most important part. Try not to wait too long. I understand feeling nervous. I understand feeling kind of shy about it. But I would say just go for it and we'll keep going. Here's a bunch of resources. You should basically have all these things at your fingertips. There are many resources that are in these sort of phases of various developments, which we'll sort of sometimes go over, like in our reflection time. I'll probably show you some things like, oh, here's some tools that'll help with this type of thing or that type of thing. And it's so interesting to me because like I was gonna say like we are going to gather, right? So like wooch ka nach watu da'at is how to say we gathered together. But if you want to say we're going to gather, wooch ka nach ke gach tu da'at, and the K part has to be there. And remember in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I think that's one of those ga conjugation ones, which doesn't always make sense to me. Like, I don't know why that verb would be ga conjugation, but it is. And so you have to remember that to put the K in front of it in the future mode. By the end of this course, the goal is for you to be able to function in a Tlingit language medium environment, where Tlingit is the language of communication, understanding the topics being discussed and making contributions, to listen to speech acts by high fluency speakers and give responses that demonstrate comprehension and the ability to think critically in Tlingit, to communicate personal thoughts and opinions on current and historical events in Tlingit, and to translate concepts and phrases from English to Tlingit or Tlingit to English, which brings us to the Thursday class. So for the Thursday class, one of the things that I talked about at the beginning that I didn't translate was the large landslide that recently happened in Ketchikan, and just thinking about these things and how this has been part of life with Tlingit people. We live in a place that has landslides. There's lots of stories about them. There's recorded things. I shared a story about 2 different instances where a medicine person, through their dreams, they knew that the landslide was going to come. And so at Yandistake, they've moved out of the area completely, and then it covered all, like those houses just got completely demolished. And in Xeiyí, which is the valley near x'úx'u, there was a gold rush town, and the same thing. Like the medicine person there said, there's a landslide coming, and all the Tlingit people left, and a lot of the newcomers, they're like, yeah, as if you guys know, and then a lot of them died, and so it's a very serious thing. It's very tragic. A lot of people are displaced from their homes. There's lots of aftermath from the floods, and this is something that seems to be a regular thing in Southeast Alaska now. It's like one every year, one massive landslide every year, which is kind of new. It seems like it's a new thing as far as like the level of impact. And so that's a topic of today. So my recommendation is for us to avoid politics at all costs, because it's an election year, and it's just so overdone. It's just so, but if you could bring in some, so what you'll do on a Thursday is you'll go find some sort of current event, a news article, something, something that has happened recently. And you are going to bring that in as a conversation piece. So all of us will be bringing in something. So if everything goes right, we'll have 12 different things to talk about, which we can easily do. And we might not get to all of the things, but the goal is to engage in conversation and probably take turns getting us started, right? And so I'll do a lot of the leading, but then at some point I'll say, okay, get our conversation started. And it's not like we have to spend 1 hour talking about some, I don't know, some whatever the thing could be. I just found out yesterday like gold is made in space. I don't know. And so bring in some kind of thing, and we're going to try and figure out how we would talk about that in Tlingit. And so that's the sort of basic structure of the class. So your work is to show up, to sign up to assist with conversations. So we'll all take turns. We'll each do one Tuesday class, 1/3. And that doesn't mean it's all on you. It means you just got to go start the fire that day. And so you're the one who starts the conversation, and then we'll all join in. We all will help each other out. And then for the midterm, you're going to pick a recording of a high fluency elder, and you're going to give a 5-minute response to what they said. And so the thing here is it might be a recording of someone who's gone, but if they were here today, what would you say to them in response to this particular recording? And then the final is going to be some sort of current event, and giving like a 5-minute summary of your opinion on it. And so these are language speech acts. That's, but what we'll probably do we'll see how we do for that. Like we'll probably have just one particular class set aside where we each take a turn, and it's a little bit less of a conversation, and it's a little bit more of a standing up and speaking. And, the midterm and the final aren't recorded, so it's just us. Nobody else sees it. Everybody gets an A in this class if you just show up and do the things. That's really the goal. If it starts getting into these other letters, it's complicated, and I really don't like that part. I just like to give everybody an A for just showing up and doing the thing, because it's so hard. You can assess this course. It does really help just in terms of like, how did it go? What could we do differently next time? How can we make it better? And what kinds of things worked? It does help the university to decide who to keep on as professors and stuff like that. And it helps, it does help us if people say good job, If you experience any sort of discrimination based on your identity, please let me know, or let our Office of Equity and Compliance in Title IX know. It is important that you can be yourself and feel comfortable. And so if there are things that are making you uncomfortable, you can always reach out to me and we could set up a time to have a conversation and make sure you're feeling okay. But any of your belief systems, your modes of identifying who you are, none of that stuff should feel like you have to hide that or you have to change who you are in order to fit in for the class. Like that should not be anything that you experience here. And if you do experience or you think you witness some form of discrimination in any of the business of the university, I'm happy to help you navigate those things and create change that doesn't happen. If you have any sort of special circumstances or disabilities, there are resources at the university to help you. And there's counseling available through the university. There's a lot of different things that you are entitled to as a student of classes at the university. So I encourage you to advocate for yourself. Let me know if there's things that can help you. And to, if you contact these offices, they will let us know as professors if you need extra time or extra resources for anything in our classes. I'm also generally super flexible just because like we're the ones doing the thing and it takes a lot to do the thing. I don't really give like the feedback I usually give when people are using the language is just trying to sort of pick things to teach at a later time. And so if there's things I'm hearing, certain patterns or certain things that I think might need some adjustment, I generally don't do that immediately after someone speaks because we'll be in Lingi. And so I think it is helpful though to go over those things at some point. If you or anyone you know experiences any sort of thing that falls under Title IX, which is gender discrimination, any sort of stalking, harassment, or sexual violence, just know that there are ways to advocate for yourself and to be in a safe environment, especially if these things are affecting you. And just don't put anyone in a situation as well where they're feeling harmed because of any actions that you might be engaging in. There are lots of resources here. I am a responsible reporter, which means if I hear of something, then I need to make a report of it to make sure that you are safe and that things like this are not in the way of your education. This is important to all of us at the university. I do need to update. This part of my syllabus is out of date. So there's some contact information here, especially for folks who work at UAS that I need to update. So I'll put an updated syllabus on our class website within the next couple of days here. As far as what we do, it all comes down to talking so these are elders we listen to, and this is things of today. That's the whole structure of our class. That's what we're going to do. I don't think I scheduled specific times in here for your midterm and for your, I guess I did put the final in there. And so, but we'll talk about that as we go along, when exactly we're going to do that, how we're going to structure it. But those would be days where it's not quite conversation. It's more like watching everyone give like a 5-minute presentation, and you could use as many visuals that you want to that help you. 5 minutes is kind of an eternity if you're like stand up and speak for 5 minutes. But to do the like it was harder when I did it type of conversation. There were times when we'd go to language camps and they would say, okay, the elders are going to go sit over here and you guys are going to take turns standing up in front of them and speaking. So when I had to give my sort of final speeches, it was in front of Paul Jackson and Nora Dowenhauer and Ruth Demert and just Johnny Marks and just these huge people who were just like looking at you and listen. And, they're so happy that we were doing that, but it was extreme. And so we'll try and do the less extreme version here. So any thoughts or questions before we go?
Yeah, I just have a question. Just for if we have, I guess, like language questions that come up, should we like I think just because we have like limited time, is that something we would ask at the reflection time or like during advanced tlingit or
Yeah,
jineiyí?
that's a good question. That's why I was sort of leaning towards like having a, so I don't really know that much about Discord, but I know that it's a way that we can have like a chat. So like there's a chat that we can all see and that gets recorded. And so I think that would be a great place for question and answer things, because then we can all see the question, we can all see the answer, and it's basically in the form of like a message board type of thing. I think that would be my preferred method. And then we can certainly do it in those reflection times. So especially as we get started, like we're going to try and go 60 minutes in Tlingit and 30 minutes in English. And then during those 30 minutes is when we would sort of try and take care of some of those things. But yeah, because we're going to run into all kinds of stuff that we have questions about. Like, how do you do that? How do you do, like if I say, I think I said this earlier, I haven't seen them yet. And so like just like learning how to use that stuff, it does open a lot of doors. It opens a lot of doors to be able to use that form. Like the I haven't eaten that yet. Wait, you can get whale at a restaurant, like right downstairs where we're staying. And I was like, that's really interesting to me. And so, but just, yeah, if you have specific language questions, I want to make sure that we always have ways to take care of that. And even though we always have limited time, I don't want us to feel like we don't have time, because then you'll be like, oh, I can't ask that. I'll have to figure out on my own. And I don't want you to feel like you're on your own. I want you to know that we are doing this stuff together. And we're probably going to run into stuff where it's like, I don't know. Let's go ask someone. And you know what? They might not know. Like, and so these are things that we'll have to sort of figure out together. Like I was when we're driving through this big tunnel, you know, and it's been fun speaking to my kids here in Tlingit. I was like, what do we call this thing? It's like a big, huge, you know, and so I said, of course it gets long. At Xeiyí, right? And so that was how I was describing it. It's a hole that people drive through under the ground. And so it was, and then we hit the roundabout. I was like, oh, come on. And so but I think this is fun. Like when we get into making the language a daily use thing, we're gonna run into all kinds of stuff like that. So you have time and we have ways. And so your folks' goal over the next couple of weeks here is to just get comfortable with each other and just talk through, like really think about this question. What would it take for you to fully function in Tlingit? And then you guys will have a laundry list of things. I can respond to emails, but I think I'm 10 or 9 hours ahead of you folks, depending on where you're at. And so it's a little difficult to do like call-in type of stuff or office hours, but I'll be back full time after this trip. Okay. We're gonna cheese. I'm gonna go take a nap before the next thing. Ik statini x'úx'u jigax jitlaqi. Yeah, we're gonna cheese.
Cheesh.
Cheers, Dalton.
Good day.
Oh.